Hello, my name is Elena Kожevnikova and I'm from Moscow Institute of Foreign Languages, People's Friendship University of Russia, and I would like to present my work, The Impact of Language Exposure and Artificial Linguistic Environment on Students' Vocabulary Acquisition. As you know, there are several important factors that have some influence on learning a second language, and it is essential to isolate the theories behind second language acquisition to figure out how languages are learned and what elements play an important role in a successful language acquisition. The second language acquisition and input hypotheses were developed by Stephen Krashen in 1970s and 80s and drew everybody's attention to the difference between language acquisition and language learning. The theory was named second language acquisition when SLA students acquire a second language. This process is totally subconscious and it occurs when people are focused on communication. It can be opposed to second language learning, which includes formal instruction. By the 1980s, the theories of Stephen Krashen had become the prominent paradigm in SLA. The difference between acquisition and learning is the most fundamental of all his hypotheses and are widely known among most linguists. According to Krashen's input hypothesis, the learner increases his or her second language proficiency, receiving second language input, which should preferably be one step beyond his or her present linguistic development. For example, if a student is at stage I, language acquisition occurs when he or she is being exposed to the input of the level I+1. Since most language groups tend to be very diverse and the learners cannot be at the same level of linguistic competence, Krashen believes that natural communicative input is the most important factor to designing a syllabus, because that is the best way to make sure that each learner will receive some of the input that is appropriate for his or her stage of language proficiency. As for Krashen's effective filter hypothesis, it is also important to mention that this hypothesis, which describes Krashen's view on the number of effective variables, which play a key role in second language acquisition. These variables include self-confidence, motivation, and anxiety. According to this theory, learners with high motivation and good self-worth and low level of anxiety will be more successful in second language acquisition. The next theory implies that any language acquisition is inborn. So many nativists believe that this predisposition is a systematic perception of language around us, resulting in the consumption of internalized system of language. Sociocultural theories. In the 1990s, a number of new theories appeared in his field of study, such as Michael Long's interaction hypothesis, Meryl Swan's output hypothesis, and Richard Schmidt's noticing hypothesis, as well as the introduction of sociocultural theory and an approach which looks at second language acquisition in terms of the social environment of the learner. As for vocabulary knowledge, we can say that vocabulary knowledge is a benchmark of proficiency in writing, reading, listening, and speaking. Since the 1970s, with the appearance of SLA theories, there has been a dramatic improvement in the field of vocabulary acquisition and reconsidering the role of vocabulary as a whole. Vocabulary acquisition is the largest task that learners face. What is more, the recognition of importance of lexical chunks and its influence on fluency has raised awareness of teachers and learners and made language learning more efficient than ever before. There are many ways how to improve your vocabulary, and there are many ways to remember it better. One of the factors that determines successful language teaching and learning is language exposure. The amount of time students are exposed to the target language and culture. It also refers to the amount of time a person interacts with language and when a person takes part in all ways of communication. So, as we can see from the definition, exposure takes place every time a person interacts with the target language. This happens when a language learner is talking to native speakers, teachers, friends, classmates, reading books, magazines, newspapers, browsing the net, getting information from various media sources, watching YouTube videos and movies. In many communities, the amount of language and cultural exposure is so limited that language learners hardly interact with people from other countries, which makes their language teacher the only source of spoken language. With the spread of the internet and social media, second language learners are making greater use of all possible ways and sources to acquire the language. It is important to mention that teacher is a highly productive source of vocabulary input. Learners pick up a lot of incidental language from the teacher, especially if the teacher relates stories, interacts with students, asks questions, and increases language exposure. Students can also be a good source of vocabulary acquisition, since students pay more attention to what other students say. This allows the vocabulary spin-off in the classroom and creates the friendly, stress-free atmosphere in the classroom, which is integral for successful language acquisition. English teacher sometimes is the learner's only input of new authentic language and authentic materials. The importance of exposure for second language students can't be underestimated. For numerous reasons, when the students do not have enough exposure to authentic or semi-authentic communication, they can considerably slow in their process, and that invariably affects their linguistic development and competence. The lack of native speakers available for students is another reason why students do not have any access to authentic communication. The communities where second language or foreign language learning is made difficult by some social, political, cultural, and other factors can constrain language acquisition. Thus, the classroom can become a place with authentic and efficient language environment that can be created there. It gives the learners plenty of opportunities to pick up language and encourage them to use a lot of various authentic materials at home and outside class. One of the important factors that determines successful language teaching and learning is the amount of time students are exposed to the target language and culture. There are lots of ways to increase vocabulary acquisition. While some students prove that adult students can efficiently use informal linguistic environment for second language acquisition if it is available, other studies suggest that the classroom learning environment is a greater benefit. Both informal and formal environments make a great contribution to different aspects of second language proficiency. The classroom can be used at the same time as a formal and informal linguistic environment, which can be more beneficial for SLA students. The most important thing to start is to make sure the students' individual work and self-study is arranged in such a way that they have maximum of diverse exposure to the target language with wide variety of materials, authentic, semi-authentic, and cultural artifacts. Activities which are connected with culture studies can be rather rewarding, trying to improve students' cultural awareness and second language proficiency. By using some culturally inclusive learning environment, we motivate students to work on their intercultural and language skills at the same time, as well as helping learners pick up the vocabulary appropriate for various cultural situations and preparing them for cross-cultural communication. One of the easiest and most enjoyable ways to increase vocabulary is to use authentic materials which bring the means and aim of learning together, and this helps to establish the connection with the outer world. Reading provides more opportunities for language learning than spoken discourse. Students acquire some vocabulary incidentally, and that happens because of the recurrent vocabulary they already possess. This type of reading means that students chain read in one genre, thus accumulating some vocabulary in this particular segment. The case for narrow reading is based on the idea that the acquisition of both structure and vocabulary come from many exposures in an incomprehensible context. That is, we acquire new structures and words when we understand the message that they encode. Newspapers and magazines can present another rich source of graded readers that provide a way for students to get comprehensible input. Positive and friendly atmosphere in the classroom cannot be underestimated too. In order to progress in any area, the learner needs enough courage to take risks and make mistakes, a willingness to share and engage in the tasks given and ask for help. While the teacher should show interest in the learner's language, culture, thoughts, and intentions, teachers' ability to recognize students' strengths and potential, motivate, stimulate, and challenge, as well as to be sensitive and aware of when to intervene. A lot of vocabulary games that are used in the first language can be applied in the second language successfully. The most useful vocabulary games are those that encourage students to recall a lot of words at speed and filled with language talk. All kinds of problem-solving tasks and debates ensure that learners are engaged in near authentic, meaningful interaction. A study was conducted in the State University of Saratov, Russia, where English is taught as one of students' second languages. The target respondents that took part in this test are all IT majors, third-year intermediate students, 8 male students, and 5 female students. At the beginning of their school year in September 2017, students were given some written vocabulary and grammar tests from the testing booklet of New English File Intermediate and a short essay about their future occupation to assess their overall language proficiency. The second part of the test was a 5-minute long interview with English teachers. All the tests revealed that students were more confident when they had some visual aid, written tests, and quite confused when they were asked questions. Were not able to answer simple questions on basic topics, yet could give precise definitions of some grammar phenomena. Didn't understand most of realities, both language and cultural. Coped with an average of 55 to 88% of grammar tasks and 53 to 83% of vocabulary tasks. 5% of students couldn't answer basic questions about themselves, hobbies, due to confusion, shyness, or just inability to understand oral speech. There was a gap between their written and oral performance. The research period lasted for 8 months, from September to February. All the methods and techniques described above were applied. Apart from their regular English instruction, some changes were made. Throughout this period, all students were watching American TV series at home and in class 2 times a week, with further discussion of realities and new vocabulary that they encountered with the teacher. They were discouraged from using their native language, Russian, as soon as they entered the English classroom. The materials that they got for classwork and home assignments came from books and authentic press. Every student got an individual task on extensive narrow reading and listening, 100 pages a month. Error correction was targeted at paraphrasing, not direct instruction, to lower students' anxiety level. Vocabulary and fluency games were practiced for 15–20 minutes during each class. Some attention was given to culture studies and the details of cross-cultural communication. In the end of the spring semester, the same tests were given. So you can see the results in the students' progress chart. As we can see from the tables above, the increase in vocabulary as well as in grammar shows that learners benefited in both spheres. Vocabulary acquisition was taking place more actively during all the activities that students were engaged during these 6 months. Apart from the results of the written test, the oral tests revealed that students felt more at ease and less confused answering teachers' questions about everyday matters and describing pictures. There was an obvious difference in their motivation, and during the second oral test, all the students could cope with the tasks given. Learning any language is a complicated process which includes a lot of factors that should be taken into consideration. So learners of foreign languages and teachers obviously need to make a lot of factors into consideration to turn the tedious learning process into a motivating activity beneficial for both parties. Thank you for your attention.